Hello, my most amazing artists, and welcome back to week 3 of our Robin's Egg Bird Nest project. Wow, that is a mouthful, isn't it? The first week we created our background for our bird's nest, and we added different colors to brown to create a bunch of different earth tones. And then last week we created a textured piece of paper, and now that this paint has dried and I run my finger across this, I can really feel all the different textures. Some areas are very smooth while other areas are bumpy or rough. So if you did a painting like this, run your finger across your paper whenever you get it and see what kinds of textures you can feel. Now today we are going to start collaging this textured piece of paper onto our background. Remember, a collage is when you take different pieces of paper or different items and you arrange it onto another piece of paper to create something new. So we're going to take this paper, we're going to cut it up and glue it, arrange it onto this piece of paper to create the beginning of our bird's nest. And to do that, you're just going to need a few things. You will need our background we made in week 1, your texture paper we made in week 2, some scissors, and I like to use this little glue cup with a white washable glue, but if you don't have this, then you can use a glue stick, and if you don't have any glue at all, you can actually just tape your pieces together. Just use whatever materials that you have at home. Okay, so now that we know everything that we need, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to do is I want to take my textured piece of paper and my scissors, and I am just going to start cutting strips out from this paper. Okay, you can make them skinny strips or a little bit fatter strips. We don't want to make them too fat because then they will just cover up our beautiful background, okay? So this is about the thickness of my finger, and I'm going to cut a few of these. Alright, so I'm just going to start out with 3, and I might need to cut more off later, but let's just start with 3 strips, and with our strip we're going to cut it into smaller strips, smaller rectangle shapes, just like this. Okay, and this is going to be glued on or collaged to our background. It's going to add a lot of texture to our bird nest. Alright, so I just cut out those strips and I cut them into smaller strips, and I started arranging them onto my background in a circular composition. Composition in an artwork is the way that you arrange your different elements, like your different colors, shapes, lines. I want to arrange these shapes, these rectangles, in a circular composition. Okay, so this is just my first layer. I'm going to add a couple more layers to make this artwork look really three-dimensional and more interesting. Before I start cutting out more strips of paper, I'm just going to go ahead and glue these pieces down, and I'm taking my white glue, and these pieces are kind of small, so instead of doing dot dot, not a lot, I'm just going to paint the back side, the entire back side, with glue, and then I'm going to stick it down. I want to make sure it's completely secure so that whenever I do the wiggle test later, it doesn't fall off. Again, I am just painting the back side of these strips of paper, flipping them back over and gluing them down onto my background, making sure to glue them in a circular composition. So I just got done gluing my first layer down, and what I want to do is just do the wiggle test real quick to make sure none of those pieces are going to fall off, and if they do, just re-glue them back in place, because we want to make sure all of these strips are glued down 100% before we start adding more strips to it. Alright, so now I am going to cut some more strips out, just like the first time we did it. That seems good. And then we're going to cut smaller strips or rectangles from those pieces. And if you have pieces that might be a little bit too wide, then you can actually just take your scissors and make them skinnier if you want to. because I think these ones are a little bit too fat, so I'm just going to cut them in half to make them skinnier. Alright, and just like the first time, we're going to keep on arranging these strips onto our background in a circular composition. And if you want, some of your pieces can even overlap over each other, okay? When a shape overlaps a different shape, that means it's just a little bit on top of it. So as you can see, the shape is overlapping this one right here because it's just on top of it a little bit. That's called overlapping, and you can overlap your shapes if you would like to. The only thing is that when we're doing this, we don't want to cover up our entire background because we worked really hard on creating those beautiful earth tones. So we're just going to add one more layer of this textured paper on to our background because we still want our background to show through underneath all of these strips. Alright, once you've finished arranging your second layer in a circular composition, then you can go ahead and start gluing those pieces down. And some of these edges are wanting to pop back up, but I'm just going back and pressing down gently to make sure they are all glued down. And actually, while I was doing that, I realized I forgot to glue this one down, so let me go ahead and do that. Alright, and what I'm going to do now is, of course, you guessed it, flip it over, wiggle it a little bit, and check to make sure none of our pieces fall off. Very good. So, I am almost done here, but I was looking at these ones, how they're kind of hanging off the side, and I really like that. It gives it a very organic, kind of nature-y feel to my bird's nest, because I think that gives it a lot of interest and makes our picture look a lot more interesting and like an actual bird's nest. Because if you look at a bird's nest, it has a lot of like sticks and twigs kind of sticking out of it. So I think it would be really cool if we kind of did the same thing with our collage here. So I'm just arranging these pieces I cut, and I'm gonna kind of overhang them off the edge just a little bit, not too much. I still want to make sure it's in a circular composition when I do this, and then I'm going to glue them down. Just going in there with my hands and making sure all those edges are nice and glued down, and I'm going to do one last wiggle test to make sure all those pieces are nice and secure. Remember, if anything falls off, then you can just take a little bit more glue and glue it back in place. Alright guys, and that is all we're going to do this week. Next week, we're going to take a little adventure outside, and we're going to go collect some things that birds actually use in their bird's nest. So we're going to pretend like we're a bird building our bird's nest, and we're going to collect some different materials and add it to our collage. So I'm really super duper excited about that, and I hope you guys are too. I can't wait to see how your bird's nest is turning out so far. I'm sure it's going to be amazing because you guys are amazing. All right, I'll see you guys next time. Bye guys.